Two superpowers, one technology, and a war that will determine who controls the next century. But almost nobody understands what they're actually fighting over. Most people think the AI war is about who builds ChatGPT versus who builds DeepSeek. Which country gets to AGI first? Who has the smarter AI? That's not the real war. That's the sideshow. The real AI war is being fought over three things most people never even think about: chips, infrastructure, and energy. And there's one company, a company America tried to destroy, that might be the key to everything. I'm Soleyman. I've spent over a decade building AI infrastructure for Fortune 500 companies, AWS, cloud architectures, to systems that actually make AI work at scale. The layer that most people never think about. And that's exactly where this war is being won and lost. By the end of this video, you will understand who's actually winning, why it's not who you think, and why a company most Americans forgot about might change everything. Let's get into it. In the world of AI dominance, there are three distinct layers where this war is being fought. I call this the AIR framework. A for applications, so ChatGPT, Claude, DeepSeek, the stuff that everyone sees, the headlines. I for infrastructure, so chips, cloud platforms, data centers, where the money actually lives. And R for resources, energy, manufacturing capacity, raw materials, where wars are ultimately won or lost. AIR. That's what this war is actually about. And here is the key insight that changes everything. Whoever controls the infrastructure and the resources ultimately controls the applications. You can have the best AI researchers in the world, but if you can't get the chips, then you can't train the models. If you can't get energy, you can't run data centers. If you can't build infrastructure fast, you will fall behind. The model war that everyone's watching, that's applications. The real war is happening in infrastructure and resources. That sounds simple, right? But almost nobody frames the AI race in this way. Everyone's debating which chatbot is smarter while ignoring who controls the chips and the energy that make the chatbots possible. So let me break down each layer, starting with A, applications, because this is where all of the attention goes. And I actually think that this is one of the most misunderstood parts of the entire AI competition. On paper, the United States is crushing it in the A layer. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, Meta AI, the best researchers, the most capital, the frontier models everyone's chasing. If you read the headlines, America is winning decisively. But hold on, here is what the headlines don't tell you. Winning the A layer might not actually matter because the application layer has terrible economics. Let me show you what I mean. OpenAI has over 800 million people using ChatGPT every single week. The most successful AI application in history. Insane adoption. Now, in the first half of 2025, they did $4.3 billion in revenue. It sounds great, right? But they also burned $2.5 billion in cash. They don't even expect to be profitable until 2030. Now, think about that for a second. The most successful AI company in history. 800 million users. Revolutionary technology. And they're losing money on every single user. Training a frontier model costs over $100 million in compute. Then you have to serve 800 million users. Every query burns electricity. Every response costs money. The companies winning the model war are bleeding money. And everyone at the application layer is hoping that the economics eventually work out. Now, here is where it gets interesting. While American AI companies burn billions of dollars hoping to figure out profitability, China is catching up faster than anyone expected. DeepSeek shocked the industry earlier this year. They trained a model that competed with GPT-4 at a fraction of Western costs. DeepSeek's final training run cost around $6 million in GPU time. Western labs were spending $100 million or more for comparable results. Now, full transparency. That $6 million figure is just the final training run. Total R&D investment was likely much higher, but the efficiency breakthrough was real. They achieved frontier performance with far less compute. So the question is, how? Clever engineering, sure. Efficiency optimization, but also structural advantages that we'll get to. But here is what matters the most, and this is the part that should concern American strategists. DeepSeek trained its model on NVIDIA H800 chips. These are American designed chips. NVIDIA made them, but they are performance cap versions specifically created for the Chinese market under US sanctions. The US said that you can't have our best chips, but here are deliberately nerfed versions. But with those nerfed chips, Chinese engineers built a model that competed with GPT-4. The irony is incredible. America tried to slow China down by restricting chip performance, but those very restrictions actually forced Chinese engineers to innovate, to do more with less. They couldn't rely on throwing unlimited compute at problems. They had to get clever, and it worked. So let me tie this section function together. The application layer, America is ahead, but the lead is shrinking because China is catching up, and everyone at this layer is losing money trying to figure out sustainability. This layer might not even decide the winner, because whoever controls the infrastructure that the models run on capture the real value. Which brings me to the I layer. Infrastructure. The I layer, or the infrastructure layer, is where the money actually lives, and this is where the real battle is being fought. So let me explain the mechanics of how AI infrastructure actually works, because once you understand this, you understand why the chip war matters so much. Now, at the center of the infrastructure layer is one company. NVIDIA. NVIDIA controls 80 to 90% of the AI training chip market. Their GPUs power virtually every major AI system on Earth. ChatGPT, NVIDIA. Claude, NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is like, we'll sell chips to everyone. OpenAI is like, we need your chips to train our models. Anthropic is like, we need your chips to train our models. Everyone needs NVIDIA, and NVIDIA doesn't need any specific customer. So let me show you why this position is so powerful. Industry analysts estimate that it costs NVIDIA roughly $3,000 to manufacture an H100 GPU. Though NVIDIA doesn't disclose the exact figures, they sell it for $25,000 all the way to $40,000. Gross margins over 73%. In Q3 of 2025 alone, NVIDIA did $57 billion in revenue, one quarter. So while OpenAI burns $2.5 billion trying to make ChatGPT profitable, NVIDIA is printing money, selling them the chips to do it. Now, the infrastructure layer economics versus the application layer economics, it's like the California gold rush. The miners are digging, hoping to strike it rich. NVIDIA is selling the shovels. They win regardless of which miner finds the gold. Now, the US government understood this strategic advantage, and they decided to use it as a weapon. Starting in 2022 and accelerating since, America has implemented the most aggressive technology export controls in decades. And the goal here is to cut China off from advanced AI chips. NVIDIA can't sell its most advanced chips to China. AMD can't, Intel can't. The US has also restricted semiconductor manufacturing equipment, targeting China's ability to build its own chip industry. The strategy is basically, if China can't get advanced chips, then it can't compete in AI. But here is where the story gets really interesting. The sanctions didn't completely cut China off. They actually created a loophole. The US said that you can't have our best chips, but we'll sell you performance-capped versions instead. So NVIDIA created the H800 specifically for China. Same American design, deliberately nerfed performance. And here is the irony. Chinese engineers took those nerfed chips and did something nobody actually expected. They optimized their algorithms. They innovated around the restrictions. They figured out how to do more with less. So DeepSeek's breakthrough model trained on those NVIDIA H800 chips. American designed hardware that US sanctions deliberately allowed China to buy. America tried to slow China down by restricting the chip performance. But those very restrictions forced Chinese engineers to get clever, to get creative. The sanctions didn't stop their breakthrough. They actually created the conditions that made it possible. And even recently, we know that Trump has approved the sale of the H200s to China, which is a complete reversal of Biden's restrictions and Trump's own previous policies. But here is where it gets even more interesting. While DeepSeek was proving that you could innovate within American restrictions, another company was building something else entirely, Huawei. Now, most Americans think of Huawei or Huawei as a Chinese phone company that the US defeated, banned from American networks, cut off from Google services, crushed by sanctions even in the US and the UK. That's what they want you to think, because while everyone was celebrating Huawei's death, something else was happening. When the US cut Huawei from the American chips and software, Huawei didn't collapse. They pivoted. They took tens of billions in R&D budget and went straight at the infrastructure layer. AI chips, cloud computing, data centers. So let me introduce you to the Ascend 910C, Huawei's AI chip designed in China, increasingly manufactured through domestic supply chains. But before I tell you why this chip matters, you actually need to understand something that most people get wrong. So there are two types of AI workloads, training and inference. And think about it like this. Training is like studying for an exam. So you are reading millions of books, learning patterns, building knowledge. It's incredibly intensive. You do it once or occasionally when you want to upgrade the model. Then we have inference. So inference is like taking the exam over and over. Every time someone types a prompt into ChatGPT, that's inference. Every query, billions of times per day. Training requires the absolute best chips, raw power, cutting edge, and this is where NVIDIA's advantage is the biggest. But inference, you need chips that are good enough, cheap enough, and available in massive quantities. And here is why this matters. China might be behind on training chips, but 90% of compute demand isn't training, it's inference. It's serving users. And for inference, Huawei's Ascend 910C delivers roughly 60 to 70% of NVIDIA's H100 performance. Now, that's not almost as good, that's good enough. Good enough to serve billions of Chinese users. Good enough to run production AI systems. Good enough to build an entire ecosystem that doesn't need American chips. Now, for frontier model training, there's still a gap. Huawei faces constraints, limited stockpiles of certain components, and maturing ecosystem. But for the workload that actually serves users, they are already competitive. And that changes everything about how you think about who's winning the infrastructure layer. And this is the great irony of the chip war. Now, before sanctions, companies bought Nvidia. Why wouldn't they? Buy the best, focus on applications. They had no incentive to develop alternatives. After the sanctions, they had no choice. Build domestic chips or fall behind forever. So the US sanctions that was supposed to cripple Chinese AI may have actually done the opposite. They created Huawei's AI chip business. They forced China to develop self-sufficiency. They gave the Chinese government a mandate to pour unlimited resources into domestic semiconductor development. Huawei became the national champion, unlimited backing, a mandate to succeed at any cost. American sanctions may have created America's most dangerous competitor, but chips are just the beginning. Huawei is building an entire AI infrastructure ecosystem end to end. Huawei Cloud is now one of the largest cloud platforms in China, second to Alibaba Cloud with roughly 13 to 18% market share. They are building massive data centers across the country, even in the Middle East, and they're creating the complete stack: hardware, cloud platforms, AI frameworks, agentic AI, enterprise solutions. Everything a company needs to deploy AI without touching a single piece of American technology. And here is what should really concern American strategists. Every Chinese company that moves to Huawei's ecosystem is a customer America can never win back. And Huawei isn't staying in China. They are operating 101 availability zones across 34 regions: Africa, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Latin America, countries that don't want to depend on American technology, countries that got burned by sanctions and want alternatives. While America argues about export controls, Huawei is building the infrastructure that half of the world might run on. It's the Belt and Road Initiative, but for AI. Now, there's one massive vulnerability in America's chip dominance that nobody wants to talk about: Taiwan. The most advanced chips in the world, including NVIDIA's GPUs, are manufactured by one company, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, on an island 100 miles from mainland China, an island that China claims as its own territory. TSMC produces over 90% of the world's most advanced logic chips. So let me make this concrete. NVIDIA can design the best chips in the world. If TSMC can't manufacture them, they're just blueprints, expensive PDFs. And let me paint you the picture. I am not predicting this, but you need to understand the stakes. It's a Tuesday morning. News breaks that China has begun a naval exercise around Taiwan. Not an invasion, not even a full blockade, just military exercises that are happening to disrupt shipping lanes. Within hours, TSMC announces a production pause out of an abundance of caution. Nvidia stocks drop 30% at open, Apple drops 25%, every semiconductor company craters. Cloud providers announce a capacity constraint for new AI deployments. Every company training frontier models hits pause. You can't train what you can't compute. The entire AI race, everything that we've discussed, freezes. That's not science fiction. That's a scenario that keeps the Pentagon planners awake at night. That's why the US passed the CHIPS Act, $52 billion to build semiconductor manufacturing on American soil. But these will take 4 to 5 years to build. The Arizona facility keeps getting delayed. The vulnerability remains. Both nations know it. America is racing to reduce Taiwan dependence before something happens, and China is racing to build domestic alternatives before the window closes. And Taiwan sits in the middle, manufacturing chips for both sides of a Cold War, hoping the Cold War stays cold. The infrastructure layer, the layer where America has its biggest advantage, depends on one island staying stable. That's the wild card that could rewrite everything overnight. So let me summarize the infrastructure layer for you. America is winning right now. Nvidia dominance is real. Export controls have slowed down China's access to cutting-edge hardware, but Huawei is building a parallel ecosystem. Every month, that ecosystem gets stronger. The Taiwan vulnerability does exist, and the trend lines are moving in China's direction. The US controls the infrastructure layer today, but for how long? Now, I can already hear the objection. America always wins these races. We won semiconductors, we won the internet, we won mobile, we won social, we'll win AI. And historically, that is true. American innovation is real. American capital markets are unmatched. unmatched. American talent pipeline are the envy of the world. But here is what's different this time. The US won semiconductors when manufacturing was domestic. American fabs, American workers, American supply chains. But today, 90% of advanced chips are manufactured in Taiwan. Not America. American design, yes. American manufacturing, not for decades. The US won the internet when energy was abundant and cheap. Web servers don't consume much power. AI requires 1,000 times more energy than traditional computing. Data centers that need their own power plants. Energy equation has completely changed. The US won the previous tech races when China was decades behind, playing catch up on technology that America invented. Today, they are months behind on applications, potentially ahead on energy infrastructure, building parallel ecosystems in real time. This isn't 1990. The structural advantages have shifted, but that doesn't mean that America loses, but it means the race is closer than the headlines suggest. And it means that the infrastructure and the resource layers matter more than they ever did before. Which brings me to the layer almost nobody talks about, the layer where China might actually be winning. Everyone talks about chips, 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 but here is what they're missing. Chips are manufactured goods. Supply eventually increases. Countries find workarounds. We just talked about Huawei, but energy is different. You can't manufacture electricity. You can't import it across oceans. You can't sanction your way of energy constraints. Energy is the fundamental bottleneck. A supercomputer without power is just a very expensive heater. So let me show you why this matters. Training a frontier model uses the energy of equivalent of powering 130 US homes for the entire year, just for training. Then you serve 800 million users, 2.5 billion prompts per day. Every query burns power. By 2035, AI data centers are projected to consume 8.6% of total US electricity demand. And as AI scales, energy demands don't grow linearly, they explode. And this isn't just my theory. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has repeatedly warned that energy, not chips, is actually becoming AI's decisive bottleneck. On the Joe Rogan podcast, he put it bluntly, that's the bottleneck.
That is a big bottleneck, right? Is energy.
Yeah, it is the bottleneck.
The bottleneck.
Yeah.
At a DC think tank, he clarified AI progress does not start with GPUs, but with the electricity and the physical capacity that's needed to compute at scale. When the CEO of the most important AI infrastructure company tells you that the energy is the real bottleneck, then you should probably listen. So here is what most Americans don't realize. China produces more than double the electricity of the United States, 2.3 times as much. Now in 2024, China generated over 10,000 terawatt hours. The US, about 4,400. They've been securing long-term energy supplies for years. Russian natural gas through Siberian pipelines. Massive investments in nuclear. The largest renewable build-out in human history. Their electricity is cheaper. Their supply is more secure, their grid is expanding faster than anywhere on Earth. So let me show you why this matters economically. Operating costs represent 30 to 50% of a data center's lifetime expenses. And energy, including electricity and cooling, consumes 50 to 85% of those operating costs. Now for the biggest cloud companies spending billions, even small efficiency gains translates to massive savings. China's industrial electricity is 30 to 40% cheaper than in the US. Now, DeepSeek's breakthrough came from engineering brilliance, algorithmic efficiency, clever optimization. But here is the thing. Every training run, every experiment, every iteration is fundamentally cheaper in China. Multiply that across thousands of researchers running thousands of experiments, and you get a structural cost advantage that compounds over time. Meanwhile, the United States is scrambling. Microsoft just signed a 20-year deal to restart 3 Mile Island Unit 1. Now, to be clear, this isn't the Unit 2 reactor that melted down in 1979. This is the adjacent reactor that operated safely for 45 years before closing for economic reasons. But still, the 3 Mile Island, the name that most Americans associate with nuclear catastrophe, they're so desperate for AI-capable power that they're willing to restart it. Google, Amazon, Microsoft are all announcing nuclear and renewable deals. AI companies are relocating to Texas, Wyoming, basically anywhere electricity is abundant. But here is the critical difference that nobody's talking about. Building energy infrastructure in America takes years, sometimes decades. Environmental reviews, permitting, legal challenges, local opposition, court battles. The average US data center development takes around 7 years, almost 5 years in pre-construction alone. China approves and builds major infrastructure projects in months. Huawei's data center, connected to cheap hydroelectric power, was built at a pace that would be impossible in America. And it was operational while American projects are still permitting. You can't win an AI race if you can't build the infrastructure to run fast enough. The speed gap is a massive structural disadvantage for the United States. And it's not fixable in the short term. It's baked into how the system works. Now, energy isn't the only resource that matters. Ilya, OpenAI co-founder, one of the smartest AI researchers alive, said at a conference in December 2024 that data is the fossil fuel of AI. We've achieved peak data data and there will be no more. Most high-quality internet data has already been scraped or stolen. Now, what's left is low-quality content, duplicates, and spam. Synthetic data, AI training AI, shows quality degradation. Research papers document something called model collapse. Think about it like this. Each generation of AI training on AI-generated data loses something, like a photocopy of a photocopy. Eventually, it just degrades. China has 1.4 billion people generating data in a closed ecosystem. WeChat, Alibaba, Baidu, Douyin, I probably butchered that one, TikTok's Chinese version. Data that Western companies cannot access. In languages Western countries don't prioritize. And that data flows into Huawei's cloud infrastructure. Training Chinese AI models on Chinese chips powered by Chinese energy, a completely self-sufficient AI ecosystem. So the resource layer. China has structural advantages America can't quickly replicate: more electricity, cheaper energy, faster infrastructure build-out, better government coordination, massive proprietary data ecosystems. If AI becomes an energy-dominated race, and every indicator says that it will, China isn't just competitive, they're playing a different game on a different board. Now, there is a group nobody's talking about in this AI war. The countries caught in the middle. Europe, Japan, South Korea, India, Brazil, everyone who isn't American or China. They face an impossible choice. Option 1, depend on American infrastructure. NVIDIA chips, AWS and Azure Cloud, American AI models, but that means American sanctions can cut you off at any time. One policy change, one diplomatic dispute, and your AI infrastructure disappears. Ask Huawei how that feels. Option B, depend on Chinese infrastructure. Huawei chips, Alibaba Cloud, Chinese AI ecosystems, but that means potential security concerns, pressure from Washington to cut ties, getting caught in the crossfire of American export controls, and then option C, build your own. Except that requires hundreds of billions of dollars in investment, decades of development, talent pipelines that you don't have, energy infrastructure that you haven't built. The EU talks about digital sovereignty. They spent years writing AI regulations, but they don't even have a single company that can compete with NVIDIA, Huawei, or even OpenAI. Most countries will be forced to pick a side. Some will try to play both, buying American chips while building Huawei data centers. But the era of technology neutrality is ending. And here is what that means for everyone watching. The AI war isn't just about America versus China. It's about which technology stack the rest of the world runs on. Huawei isn't expanding into Africa and Southeast Asia because they love emerging markets. They're building the infrastructure those countries will depend on for decades. America isn't pushing chip export controls because they hate China. They're trying to ensure the world stays on American rails. The war for the infrastructure and resource layers is really a war for the entire global technology stack. And most of the world is just trying not to get crushed in the middle. Now, I want to be intellectually honest here, because I don't know exactly how this plays out. Nobody does. But let me share how I'm thinking about the time horizons. Over 5 years, America likely maintains its lead. Chips advantage persists, talent stays concentrated, NVIDIA is still dominating. Over 10 years, it gets a little bit messier. If energy becomes the bottleneck, if China achieves full chip independence through Huawei and others, that balance could shift. Over 20 years, resources may determine everything. The nation that can power AI cheapest and build infrastructure the fastest will win, regardless of who invented the best chatbot. So what does that actually mean? For you, for the industry, for the future? First, expect this war to intensify. Chip export controls will get tighter, both nations will double down on self-sufficiency. We're moving toward a bifurcated technology world. American AI and Chinese AI is developing in parallel. Different chips, different infrastructure, different ecosystems. Companies will be forced to choose their sides. The we sell to everyone era is ending. Secondly, energy will move from background issue to front page crisis. The scramble for AI-capable electricity is just the beginning. Nuclear deals, renewable investments, grid upgrades, these will dominate tech news. Countries and companies that solve energy will lead. Those that don't will fall behind regardless of their AI capabilities. Watch for energy to become the limiting factor that determines who can actually scale AI. Thirdly, watch Huawei expand globally. They're not just building for China. They are building for every country that wants an alternative to American technology. Africa, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Latin America. By 2030, there may be two technology worlds. American infrastructure serving the West, Chinese infrastructure built largely by Huawei serving everyone else. Fourth, Taiwan remains the wildcard that could change everything overnight. Both nations are trying to reduce Taiwan dependency. Neither have succeeded. If Taiwan becomes unstable for any reason, the entire calculus transforms. Chip supplies collapse, timelines accelerate, everything that we've discussed gets rewritten. So what does that mean if you're working in AI, building in tech, or just trying to understand where this is heading? If you're building, understand that infrastructure matters more than applications. Position yourself in the infrastructure layer if you can. Cloud, security, AI engineering. The systems that make AI work at scale. Build things that work regardless of which model wins. If you're investing, follow the infrastructure, not the hype. Nvidia, cloud providers, energy companies, semiconductor equipment, picks and shovels outperform the gold miners. They did in 1849, they will in 2026 and beyond. If you're watching Geopolitically, understand that the real competition isn't about chatbots, it's about chips, energy, and who can build infrastructure the fastest. The nation that wins those battles wins AI. The nation that wins AI reshapes the next century. Now, deep breath. If you've made it this far, here is what I'm personally thinking about all of this. I am focused on infrastructure skills, not because applications don't matter. I use AI every day in my businesses, but because infrastructure is where the durable value gets created. I'm watching Huawei closely, not because I'm rooting for anyone, but because what happens with that company tells us more about the AI race than any model benchmark. When a company goes from a phone maker to the AI infrastructure backbone in 5 years, that's not luck. That's a national strategy playing out in real time. And I am skeptical of anyone who tells you they know exactly how this ends, because the honest answer is nobody does. Maybe Americans' chips advantage persists for decades. Maybe China's energy advantage becomes decisive. Maybe Taiwan changes everything tomorrow. The best that I can do is explain it to the best of my ability and help you see what's actually happening beneath the surface and the headlines. So here's what I keep coming back to. Everyone's asking the wrong question. Who has the best AI? Which chatbot is smartest? Who gets to AGI first? These are the wrong questions. All of them. The right questions are who has the chips? Who has the energy? Who can build the fastest? Answer those 3 questions and you know who wins AI. So let me bring this back to the AIR framework one more time. AI for applications, American leads, but everyone's losing money. This layer might not decide anything. I for infrastructure. America leads with Nvidia, but Huawei is building a parallel ecosystem and Taiwan is a vulnerability that could change everything overnight. R for resources. China has structural advantages in energy, manufacturing speed, and government coordination. If this becomes an energy-dominated race, and every single indicator says that it will, those advantages will compound over time. The United States is winning the war that everyone can see. China might be winning the war that nobody's watching. The model war is the sideshow. The infrastructure war is the main event. So make sure that you're watching the right fight, because this is the most important technological competition of our lifetimes. And most people are watching the chatbot wars. But now you know where the real war is being fought. As always, I'm rooting for you. Good luck.